Okay, so I tried to take a nap and I can't because I'm thinking too much about this stupid fucking concept that Sam Vaknin was going on about, and I'm trying to reconcile it in layman terms, so I'm just making a video to explain it, mainly to myself. But if I share this with anyone, have fun listening to my rambling. It's completely up to you. Okay, two things that I'm thinking about is object impermanence and people being classified as internal or external objects to someone else. What I mean by that, I'm trying to make this a quick video because I've already done this, but it took forever because I was rambling too much. So let's try and make this as succinctly as possible and to the point. So number one, I'm going to explain those two terms. So object impermanence means that when something is not in view or being interacted with, it does not exist in the person's mind. And internal, external objects, I will now elaborate and come back to the object impermanence later. So, internal, external objects as people in someone's mind. Let's dissect that for a second. So, all of this starts in childhood. When you're a baby, your mother or your caregiver is you, and you are your mother or caregiver in your mind. You are not two separate entities, you are the same thing because you are completely and utterly reliant on that mother or caregiver for you to survive. So at some point in early development, what happens is that when the baby or child is then separated from the mother or caregiver, or the mother or caregiver is not in the room, then the child starts to realize that they're actually not one entity, they're two separate entities. And this is where the baby or child then creates the self or the ego, because they realize that they're their own entity. Now, in normal people, what happens is that the baby or child then creates an internalized version of that mother or caregiver, which is called an internal object. But they also recognize that the mother or caregiver is also an external object, because when they come back in the room or they're back present, they can then interact with that external object, and it's no longer an internal object anymore. And then the cycle repeats. As soon as that person is out of view or out of sight, then they have their internalized object of that person in their mind. Now, why this is important is that we need to be able to remember people. We need to remember, things about them, to be able to have relationships, etc. And so that next time we see them, we can interact with them and pick up where we left off, rather than having to start all over again to find out what this person or external object is all about. So that's the healthy version. Internalized object when you're not around. When you are around, interacting with external object, which is, yeah. Now, in disordered people, so NPD, ASPD, and BPD, this shit's all fucked up. So we still create some sense of an ego or self when that external object is not around, or that person's not around, caregiver's not around. But what happens is that when the caregiver returns, something weird happens, and I'm going to explain what that means. I'm going to break it down and explain how each version deals with that. So with narcissistic personality disorder, there is no such thing as that person being an external object. So the only way that they can interact with you is with the internalized version of themselves that they've created in their brains. So you are not an external object. You are whatever version they have created of you with inside their mind. And that's why it's quite frustrating speaking to narcissistic people and you feel like you're not getting heard, because you're not an actual person. You're not an external object. You are a fictitious character within someone's brain, which is impossible. You can't talk to anyone like that. It's not actually possible. So that's NPD. With ASPD, and I actually got this wrong earlier, but anyway, with ASPD, there's no such thing as an internalized version of you. It does not exist. You are always an external version. So whenever you appear, you will always be interacted with as something that is outside of the self. There is no such thing as a concept of you within their brains. Now, I believe that the only way that they can continue on talking to you and having a relationship with you is by a logical memory, by a memory of things that have been said or done, but there's no version or personality character that they've created about you. Now, with BPD is where it gets really fucked up, and this is why we're so crazy, is because when you're around, we are still interacting with the internalized version of you, but we also know that you're an external object or that you are outside of ourselves. And so we are trying to reconcile that, and it doesn't work very well. And this is where splitting a whole bunch of stuff comes into play. But we recognize that you're an external object, but we're still trying to talk to or interact with that internalized version of you. So yeah, fucked up. I know. Anyway, back to the object impermanence. We do not have, well, I'm not too sure about ASPD, so I'm not going to talk on it, but NPD and BPD do not have object permanence, so when you are not around, you do not exist. And this is why, so many things to say about this, but this is why we have so many issues with memory. This is why we say really crazy, stupid, fucked up things, because we do not have that object permanence of you actually existing when you're not around. But yeah, those are kind of my thoughts. I have so much more to say on this, but that's part one.